Benedict of Nursia is a Christian saint, honored by the Catholic Church and the Anglican Church as the patron saint of Europe and students. Benedict founded 12 communities for monks at Subiaco, Italy to the east of Rome, before moving to Monte Cassino in the mountains of southern Italy. The Order of Saint Benedict is of later origin and, moreover, not an order, as commonly understood, but merely a confederation of autonomous congregations. Benedict's main achievement is his Rule of Saint Benedict, containing precepts for his monks. It is heavily influenced by the writings of John Cassian, and shows strong affinity with the Rule of the Master, but it also has a unique spirit of balance, moderation and reasonableness, and this persuaded most religious communities founded throughout the Middle Ages to adopt it. As a result, his rule became one of the most influential religious rules in Western Christendom. For this reason, Benedict is often called the founder of Western monasticism. Biography. Apart from a short poem attributed to Mark of Monte Cassino, the only ancient account of Benedict is found in the second volume of Pope Gregory I's four-book dialogues, thought to have been written in 593. The authenticity of this work has been hotly disputed, especially by Dr. Francis Clark in his two-volume work The Pseudo-Gregorian Dialogues. Book 2 consists of a prologue and 38 succinct chapters. Gregory's account of this saint's life is not, however, a biography in the modern sense of the word. It provides instead a spiritual portrait of the gentle, disciplined abbot. In a letter to Bishop Maximilian of Syracuse, Gregory states his intention for his dialogues, saying they are a kind of floritum of the most striking miracles of Italian holy men. Gregory did not set out to write a chronological, historically anchored story of Saint Benedict, but he did base his anecdotes on direct testimony. To establish his authority, Gregory explains that his information came from what he considered the best sources. A handful of Benedict's disciples who lived with the saint and witnessed his various miracles. These followers, he says, are Constantinus, who succeeded Benedict as abbot of Monte Cassino, Valentinianus, Simplicius, and Honoratus, who was abbot of Subiaco when St. Gregory wrote his dialogues. In Gregory's day, history was not recognized as an independent field of study. It was a branch of grammar or rhetoric, and historia summed up to the approach of the learned when they wrote what was, at that time, considered history. Gregory's Dialogues Book 2, then, an authentic medieval hagiography cast as a conversation between the Pope and his deacon Peter, is designed to teach spiritual lessons. Early life. He was the son of a Roman noble of Norcia, the modern Norcia, in Umbria, a tradition which Bede accepts makes him a twin with his sister Scholastica. If 480 is accepted as the year of his birth, the year of his abandonment of his studies and leaving home would be about 500. St. Gregory's narrative makes it impossible to suppose him younger than 19 or 20 at the time. He was old enough to be in the midst of his literary studies, to understand the real meaning and worth of the dissolute and licentious lives of his companions, and to have been deeply affected himself by the love of a woman. He was at the beginning of life, and he had at his disposal the means to a career as a Roman noble. Clearly he was not a child. Benedict does not seem to have left Rome for the purpose of becoming a hermit, but only to find some place away from the life of the great city. He took his old nurse with him as a servant and they settled down to live in Infide, which the tradition of Subiaco identifies with the modern Afile, is in the Simbruina Mountains, about 40 miles from Rome and 2 from Subiaco. A short distance from Infide is the entrance to a narrow, gloomy valley, penetrating the mountains and leading directly to Subiaco. The path continues to ascend, and the side of the ravine, on which it runs, becomes steeper, until a cave is reached above which the mountain now rises almost perpendicularly, while on the right, it strikes in a rapid descent down to where, in St. Benedict's day, 500 feet below, lay the blue waters of the lake. The cave has a large triangular-shaped opening and is about 10 feet deep. On his way from Infide, Benedict met a monk, Romanus of Subiaco, whose monastery was on the mountain above the cliff overhanging the cave. Romanus had discussed with Benedict the purpose which had brought him to Subiaco, and had given him the monk's habit. By his advice Benedict became a hermit and for 3 years, unknown to men, lived in this cave above the lake. One day, the devil brought before his imagination a beautiful woman he had formerly known, inflaming his heart with strong desire for her. Immediately, Benedict stripped off his clothes and rolled into a thorn bush until his body was lacerated. Thus, through the wounds of the body, he cured the wounds of his soul. Later life. Saint Gregory tells us little of these years. He now speaks of Benedict no longer as a youth, but as a man of God. Romanus, he twice tells us, served the saint in every way he could. The monk apparently visited him frequently, and on fixed days brought him food. During these 3 years of solitude, broken only by occasional communications with the outer world and by the visits of Romanus, Benedict matured both in mind and character, in knowledge of himself and of his fellow man, and at the same time he became not merely known to, but secured the respect of those about him, so much so that on the death of the abbot of a monastery in the neighborhood, the community came to him and begged him to become its abbot. Benedict was acquainted with the life and discipline of the monastery, and knew that their manners were diverse from his and therefore that they would never agree together. Yet, at length, overcome with their entreaty, he gave his consent. The experiment failed. The monks tried to poison him. The legend goes that they first tried to poison his drink. He prayed a blessing over the cup and the cup shattered. Thus he left the group and went back to his cave at Subiaco. There lived in the neighborhood a priest called Florence who, moved by envy, tried to ruin him. He tried to poison him with poisoned bread. When he prayed a blessing over the bread, a raven swept in and took the loaf away. From this time his miracles seem to have become frequent, and many people, attracted by his sanctity and character, came to Subiaco to be under his guidance. Having failed by sending him poisonous bread, Florence tried to seduce his monks with some prostitutes. To avoid further temptations, in 530 Benedict left Subiaco. He founded 12 monasteries in the vicinity of Subiaco, and, eventually, in 530 he founded the great Benedictine monastery of Monte Cassino, which lies on a hilltop between Rome and Naples. During the invasion of Italy, Totila, king of the Goths, ordered a general to wear his kingly robes and to see whether Benedict would discover the truth. Immediately the saint detected the impersonation, and Totila came to pay him due respect, veneration. He died at Monte Cassino not long after his sister, Saint Scholastica. Benedict died of a high fever on the day God had told him he was to die, and was buried in the same place as his sister. According to tradition, this occurred on the 21st of March 543 or 547. He was named patron protector of Europe by Pope Paul VI in 1964. In 1980, Pope John Paul II declared him co-patron of Europe, together with Saints Cyril and Methodius. In the pre-197 general Roman calendar, his feast is kept on the 21st of March, the day of his death, according to some manuscripts of the Martyrologium Hieronymianum and that of Bede, because on that date his liturgical memorial would always be impeded by the observance of Lent. The 1969 revision of the general Roman calendar moved his memorial to the 11th of July, the date that appears in some Gallic liturgical books of the end of the 8th century as the feast commemorating his death. There is some uncertainty about the origin of this feast. Accordingly, on the 21st of March the Roman Martyrology mentions in a line and a half that it is Benedict's day of death and that his memorial is celebrated on the 11th of July, while on the 11th of July it devotes 7 lines to speaking of him, and mentions the tradition that he died on the 21st of March. The Eastern Orthodox Church commemorates St. Benedict on the 14th of March. The Anglican Communion has no single universal calendar, but a provincial calendar of saints is published in each province. In almost all of these, Saint Benedict is commemorated on the 11th of July. Rule of Saint Benedict. 73 short chapters comprise the rule. Its wisdom is of two kinds: spiritual and administrative. More than half the chapters describe how to be obedient and humble, and what to do when a member of the community is not. About 1/4 regulate the work of God. 1/10 outline how, and by whom the monastery should be managed, and 2 chapters specifically describe the abbot's pastoral duties. Following the golden rule of ora et labora, pray and work, the monks each day devoted 8 hours to prayer, 8 hours to sleep, and 8 hours to manual work, sacred reading, or works of charity. The St. Benedict Medal. This medal originally came from a cross in honor of St. Benedict. On one side, the medal has an image of St. Benedict, holding the Holy Rule in his left hand and a cross in his right. There is a raven on one side of him, with a cup on the other side of him. Around the medal's outer margin are the words "Eius in obitu nostro praesentia munium." The other side of the medal has a cross with the initials CSSML on the vertical bar, which signify Crux Sacris Sit Mihi Lux, and on the horizontal bar are the initials NDSMD, which stand for Non Draco Sit Mihi Dux. The initials CSPB stand for Crux Sancti Patris Benedicta, and are located on the interior angles of the cross. Either the inscription Pax or the Christogram IHS may be found at the top of the cross in most cases. Around the medal's margin on this side are the Vade Retro Satanar initials VRS NSMV, which stand for Vade Retro Satanar, Nonquam Suada Mihi Vana, then a space followed by the initials SMQLIVB, which signify Sunt Malique Libes, IPS Evanina Bibus. This medal was first struck in 1880 to commemorate the 14th centenary of St. Benedict's birth and is also called the Jubilee Medal. Its exact origin, however, is unknown. In 1647, during a witchcraft trial at Nattenberg near Metten Abbey in Bavaria, the accused women testified they had no power over Metten, which was under the protection of the cross. An investigation found a number of painted crosses on the walls of the abbey with the letters now found on St. Benedict medals, but their meaning had been forgotten. A manuscript written in 1415 was eventually found that had a picture of St. Benedict holding a scroll in one hand and a staff which ended in a cross in the other. On the scroll and staff were written the full words of the initials contained on the crosses. Medals then began to be struck in Germany, which then spread throughout Europe. This medal was first approved by Pope Benedict XIV in his briefs of 23 December 1741, and 12 March 1742. Saint Benedict has been also the motive of many collectors' coins around the world. The Austria €50, the Christian religious orders, issued on 13 March 2002 is one of them. The influence of Saint Benedict. The early Middle Ages have been called the Benedictine centuries. In April 2008, Pope Benedict XVI discussed the influence Saint Benedict had on Western Europe. The Pope said that, with his life and works, Saint Benedict exercised a fundamental influence on the development of European civilization and culture, and helped Europe to emerge from the dark night of history that followed the fall of the Roman Empire. Saint Benedict contributed more than anyone else to the rise of monasticism in the West. His rule was the foundational document for thousands of religious communities in the Middle Ages. To this day, the rule of Saint Benedict is the most common and influential rule used by monasteries and monks, more than 1,400 years after its writing. Today the Benedictine family is represented by 2 branches, the Benedictine Federation and the Cistercians. The influence of Saint Benedict produced a true spiritual ferment in Europe, and over the coming decades his followers spread across the continent to establish a new cultural unity based on Christian faith. Gallery of pictures related to Saint Benedict. Saint Benedict and the Cup of Poison. Small gold-colored Saint Benedict crucifix. Two sides of a Saint Benedict medal. Portrait by Hermann Nieg, Heiligenkreuz Abbey, Austria. Saint Benedict at the death of Saint Scholastica, Musée National pour l'Age Médiévale, Paris, Org. At the Abbatial of Saint Denis. Statue in Einsiedeln, Switzerland.